Today is August 28th. It's a Wednesday. It's past 4:30, so we're eating into our valuable time. And this is the Water Quality Management Committee. And I guess do we get called to order? Do we get Dave Vieira to come in here as the town crier and do hear ye, and call us to order? Oh, we can go now. Here's Amy. Anyways, we have a relatively short agenda today, but I think an agenda that's important in some ways because we've not really spent enough time, I don't think, at the eastern end of Falmouth and what the issues are and what we can do and what needs to be done. So this is Kristen and I sort of kicked things around about how should we approach geo-boundaries on the south coast. I said, let's start at the east and work back, because it seems like we always start in Falmouth Center and work east. So it's about time to show a little care and concern, because it's all important.
Okay.
These are what, mermaids?
Huh? No, the mermaid's in Herring Brook.
I know mermaids.
All right, so tonight we're looking only at Wacoit Bay. Wacoit Bay, as you guys know, is a very large, very complex watershed. I have it broken into 3 individual presentations because there are 3 sentinel stations in Wacoit Bay. So we'll look at it area by area to look at how the loading differs. So to start, this image on the right, this is the extent of Eel Pond. So this is the westernmost portion of the Wacoit Bay watershed. You can see it goes all the way up, basically up on the base. This is the more localized Falmouth portion of Eel Pond. Eel Pond to Eel River, it's the same thing. Everybody in town calls it Eel River. The MEP calls it Eel Pond. So to be consistent with the MEP, I try to call them the same thing. So in the Eel Pond sub-embayment, there are about 1,560 parcels. 1,440 of those are in Falmouth. Since the MEP was finalized in 2013, according to Falmouth assessors, there have been 74 parcels that have been listed as year built. So that just, again, counts for new construction, not renovations. The freshwater resource areas in this part are Grassy Pond and Eschewment Pond. They have very little outflow as far as going into this part of the sub-embayment, but there is consideration for those as well. So our list of the different data sources I looked at for this, same list of characters, except now we're taking into consideration the GHD nitrogen loading allocation that was done. This is what the agreement with Mashpee is based on. We're also looking at long-term data from Webner as well. So from the MEP, in Wacoit Bay, the MEP is what the TMDL is based on. They are consistent with the loading that says needs to come out of the area. GHD's allocation for the 3 sub-embayments within Eel Pond, the east, south, and west, Falmouth is responsible for the vast majority. So when you apply those percentages, this is the total nitrogen that the MEP and the TMDL say that Falmouth needs to remove from the watershed. Looking at the Cape Cod Commission MVP number, they think that there's a much higher present load to come out of there. And this is an estimated portion. For Eel Pond, they have it divided into these 3 same sub-embayments. For later ones, it's different, which makes the loading calculations more challenging. So this is what the Cape Cod Commission says for their 3 areas, and it also has the nice map. This is Eel Pond East. It's a small area that's kind of the eastern side of Seacoast Shores and the south portion of Sea Pit. The west is the part that goes all the way up toward Mashpee, and then the south is this really tiny area kind of down by the inlet. So looking at calculating the nitrogen load reduction if we were to upgrade to IAs performing at 10 milligrams per liter, because that's what the state is saying their target is for best available nitrogen reducing technology. Calculating the same way that the MEP did, using water use as the proxy to get to the nitrogen mass. MEP has the average water use for a single-family home as 135 gallons per day. When I look at the MVP data and look at the single-family homes, the average I get for the entire sub-embayment is 144 gallons per day. So again, to be on the conservative side of what is at the minimum that we might be removing on average by establishing this geoboundary, I'm looking at the lower water use average. So what that means is that for the average single-family home, every IA that's installed would be about 2.7 kilogram reduction per year. For sewer values, because there is sewer plant in this area, it would be 4.4 kilograms. So this table just applies those average reductions, what the planned sewer area reduction would be. The existing IAs that I calculated based at 19 milligrams per liter, and how many single-family residents it would be required to upgrade. So this area is easy because the sewering, the proposed sewering, exceeds the nitrogen removal requirement for this watershed. Looking at the MVP numbers in the same way. Again, looking at these is just a comparison of another model that's done in a very similar fashion, but has slightly more recent data incorporated with it. So several more years of more recent water use, more recent aerial photographs for what the land use looks like for calculating impervious surfaces. So it's just another model for comparison. From a regulatory standpoint, it's the TMDL number. It's this number that the town has to meet, but that's not a guarantee that the estuary will be restored. So this does the same way, looking at that. If you look at it this way, the sewering does not meet what the MVP says. This is long.
Backtrack one more time.
Yep.
So between the two different, one of them, sewering does meet it.
Yep.
And then for the other sort of way of looking at it, it seems like it's falling quite a bit short.
Correct.
Yeah, can you explain again why, I know you've explained this
Yep,
50
that's
different
okay.
times, but why is MVP so different?
So, first of all, on that first slide, I said there was, 76 homes that have been built since the time of the MVP. So you have increased water use from that. You have changes in land use, which may have changed the water consumption for non-residential parcels in there. The aerial photography, I think the last aerial flyover that they used for calculating some of the other data, the fertilizer and the impervious surface, was 2020. But they're still using, for wastewater, they're still using water use as the proxy. There's slightly higher average, so you're getting some from that as well. And there's 1,500 homes in this watershed, so that will add up too.
Which one do you think is closer to the truth?
That's a tough pill to swallow as to whether you think the MEP was close to the truth.
Ask a question. I've heard before.
Can you step to the microphone just so you can get
Any
on
microphone.
TV? Sorry, Doug.
Hi, Doug Brown, Falmouth Select Board. I've heard other engineers, Mike McGrath and others, also comment that the amount of nitrogen that's coming out of the outlet from the septics should have been calculated at a higher percentage than what the MEP model studies. I wonder if Cape Cod Commission is using a higher percentage?
So the Cape Cod Commission and the MEP all use the state standard of what's coming out of a home is 35 milligrams per liter. And that was kind of a general consensus. I think there was a document that EPA put out that had that. We know from measuring and monitoring that that's much higher. However, the MEP model was built on 35, so to figure out how to fit our planning into the model, to make it as relatable as possible to what the model did, we have to stick with 35. Everything also with Title V, the assumption is it's a 25% nitrogen reduction because of basically your leach field. So there's a 25% factor applied to that 35 milligrams per liter already. So when you start getting,
I'm gonna try to jump in
Yep.
if I can. You're onto something, Doug, which is that the way the models are all built uses a number that Mike McGrath and others and data that we've seen isn't consistent with what's actually happening in real septic systems. Like, people have looked at what's gone on in West Falmouth and other places. The numbers are higher. They are higher. So how do we balance it or drill this? As we're doing these geo boundaries here, we're working on the assumption that we'll get to a 10 milligram per liter IEA system, which may or may not be true. So on one side, we're not trying to say that the number is higher and each one we do gets better. And on the other side, say that the systems that we're putting in don't work as good as people want to be higher. So we're kind of like, I don't want to say fudging it, but we're trying to balance on one side, one variable that's got some question on it, and another variable on the other side that's got some similar question on it, so that hopefully we're falling into a spot that's a good, solid spot. I don't want to start this whole conversation around. I'd rather let her finish the thing and then we'll come back to it.
so I'll just add one more thing to
Does
that.
that make any sense to you, where we're at? Okay?
I like to overdo it rather than underdo it.
This is also a conversation that, I know I had many times with Brian Howes. I know it's an argument that George Hoyfelder took up with the state many, many times. What Brian's answer to it was, sure, you can rerun the MEP using a higher effluent number. What it's gonna do is it's going to make this target bigger.
Yep.
So if you're looking at it from a proportion, if we're working on what we're told and we think it's a higher number that's coming out, maybe then we're removing a higher number, but we're still working under the same baseline factors that this model was built on.
But we know we probably want to do better.
All right, so this is the best long-term data set I found accessible for this area. This is this monitoring station, ER02. This is not the Sentinel station. The Sentinel station is up here closer to the tip of Antler Shores. There's not that I found, I'm sure somebody has it, long-term monitoring at the Sentinel station. This is from a database that the Cape Cod Commission put together a couple years ago. So this is the average nitrogen from 2014 to 2020 at that station. And what it says is that there has not been a statistically significant change in this data. The MEP, when the MEP was finalized for that station, it was reading at 0.428. So you can see there hasn't been much change in the 10 years since the MEP. So this is the planned sewer area. This is what has been shown in the CWMP. You have Antler Shores and Seacoast Shores. This is the portion that's in this specific area of the watershed. There's more that's planned for sewering, but it's not within Eel Pond. As I said earlier,
Can you put your cursor on Eel Pond?
this is Eel Pond West. This is Eel Pond South right here. And this portion to this line is Eel Pond East. So those are the three areas.
And you're primarily talking about Eel Pond East, and that's why the sewers that I assume are going to be on the west side of Eel Pond West don't matter?
So I'm looking at east, south, and west. West has the largest removal requirement. Right down the middle of Seacoast Shores, this is the west. So Antler Shores and this whole side of Seacoast Shores is delineated as into Eel Pond
But aren't
West.
there going to be sewers on the west side? I don't know the name of that peninsula, but the west side of-
Here?
of it, yes.
Central
Not at
Ave
this
is
point.
fine.
They're not getting
The
sewer.
east side of that should be drained towards.
That's a sewer.
East side, yes. This peninsula has not been discussed for sewering in the CWMP.
Because the Lawrence Pond is gonna flush when we open up the bridge.
And-
On the west side of it, but the east side drains into Eel Pond West.
This black line is the
So yes.
watershed, yes.
To you, the answer is yes, but the other side of it is if we sewer seacoast shores.
Oh, you're
The
wasting
effect-
it, sort of,
the
because you
effect
can
is-
only use it on the east
Right,
side.
Right, okay?
Right.
Thank you.
So, summarize, there's no proposed IA geoboundary for this because based on following the MEP model, the sewering meets the regulatory target. The other things for consideration are the fertilizer and stormwater BMPs. That's another 289 kilograms. And then the full-scale aquaculture plan, there's a couple of areas in Eel Pond, in the south or the southern part of both west and east. That would be another 400 kilograms a year. So the proposed sewer district is 58% of the parcels within that portion of the watershed. Last meeting, somebody asked for a table of running tallies, which I distributed to you guys, so I will put it on at the end of every presentation so you can see what the geo-boundary totals look like. So it's got the watershed characteristics, how many parcels are in the proposed geo-boundary, and then what your nitrogen reduction for the geo-boundary is. So here, there's 0 because there's no IAs proposed there. Any questions on this part?
But I'm still confused,
Okay.
because you said you didn't want to commit to which one is closer to the truth, which implies there's a possibility that you do need additional nitrogen removal.
So.
But then you suddenly said, all you need is the existing proposed sewers.
So there's the regulatory target, which is the TMDL, which is, as we say, solving the equation. But that doesn't mean it actually restores the estuary. That's what's modeled, so that's the starting target for adaptive management. That's the minimum that needs to be met.
This is, none of this is exact, but it's it's within the sort of, you know, what are they doing? They're doing a lot of polling these days, and they're talking about like the margin of error,
So,
right?
so are you saying the timeline is sufficiently long that we can install these sewers, see what they do, and then still have time to decide whether or not to add IAs?
Yeah. This is-
That's the essence of
Every
the-
5 years, when we come up with watershed
Yeah.
plans, every 5 years, we measure if we're making progress with the plan we've got and if we need to modify it, yeah.
Add IAs or increase the sewer area.
That's what I was
Yeah,
gonna say.
do something.
If you sewer the east side of Central Avenue, I mean, it's gonna take a significant amount of nitrogen out and get closer to meeting the MVP target. If we're trying to be somewhat conservative, wanna make sure that in the future generations, we're taking more nitrogen out. Seems to me that you'd wanna add that sewering if it's feasible.
And then there is the fact that we're trying to get down the path of getting an outfall with a specific flow on it, for which there's not an infinite amount of flow to put into it. So there's a lot of parts to be balanced in here.
So
Can't
what
just say,
this,
let's go sewer this whole other big area and add hundreds of thousands of gallons, because it's more bang for the buck in terms of you get twice as much nitrogen removal for every one home you sewer as you put IAs in. So we're trying to find the balance of getting an outfall with a fixed amount of flow we can put into it, sewering the areas that have the highest need for sewers. So, not to pick on anything here, Seacoast Shore is really dense, okay? The next peninsula over is not as dense, so part of it is that balance going on again.
It seemed to me, oh, sorry, go ahead.
So, where did these sewer boundaries come from? Is this from,
this is from the CWMP, this is what
Yeah.
was developed for,
I just
For the
question,
update.
for example, why aren't we sewering a little further north on Seacoast
We
Shores
are.
and in
We are.
the south end
We are,
of the peninsula, maybe it doesn't matter because it's a little better flush?
no, We are sewering the northern end. This is she's just showing the area that's gonna be sewered within,
In this
In
water.
this,
Watershed.
in Eel Pond,
okay?
when we get to
But I
Childs
presume
River,
that
we're
the
gonna do
actual-
this.
I mean, that's an
And
obvious
this is sort
target.
of an Amy question, but I presume that if you're building a sewer in the seacoast shores, you're gonna do it
Yes.
all at once,
Yes,
right?
We
but
are.
this
the
part right
point.
here, this is in Childs River. So
I
that's.
know it's in Childs River.
Right, so I can't show it on the Eel Pond
I get
presentation.
it, I get it. I just needed, it just was bothering me. 'cause I was
Sorry.
like, you mean they're not gonna do
We
the
will.
Childs River, which is the most impacted system and?
Yes, we are. So to John's point, this was all, the task is looking at what the knowns are right now. Right now, these areas, including the top of Seacoast Shores and Sea Pit, are included in the CWMP based on the amount of available discharge we have. So this is looking at what could you do townwide? Do the geo-boundaries make sense to maybe get into effect now ahead of watershed permits? And there are gonna be plenty of estuaries where it doesn't make sense, where you might wanna hold out defining an area or excluding an area that would be a good candidate for sewering while pursuing the outfall continues. So this is what it takes right now with what the town can do.
So you would consider it for IA or urine diversion, it's just not going to be part of the sewer plants?
Right, because we have nowhere to put it.
I'm gonna go down to Tom. 'cause
I just want to voice my dark and gloomy view of the future. Because we're gonna hit the state regulatory demands. But given what we already know in terms of what in real life leach fields are putting into the groundwater, and given the fact that there are literally tons of nitrogen in the sediments of all of these embayments, we're not going to achieve water quality, benthic community enhancements, probably not in my time, not in my lifetime. So I just want to put that out right now because we've created a monster and we're going to be a long time escaping this monster.
You're espousing a theory, which is
That's just
interesting.
my theory. That's why I was,
I would ask you to sit tight, because Ken has been looking at Little Pond extensively,
yeah, no,
okay? And I would suggest that in the near future, Ken's gonna make a presentation to us
Yep.
that might, just to help us, to try to be more positive than negative, okay? We went at Little Pond because it was one of the most impaired estuaries we could find.
Yeah.
We are continuing to measure and see certain things. Things aren't happening maybe as fast as that everyone would like, but I turned to my colleague to my right here, who was at a T-Ticket Association meeting the other night, and what he pointed out was that people used to complain about the smell of Little Pond. Nobody's complaining about the smell of Little Pond. People used to complain about the algae mats. The algae mats aren't there now, okay? People are using that area. Is it coming back as fast as we'd like? We don't know. This is where Ken's work is like almost invaluable to us, trying to understand, once we get sewers and IAs and stop flooding excess nitrogen into these embayments on their own, is it a 5-year, a 10-year, or a 15-year recovery process for them? And I can't give you that answer, and I don't know that you can yet, can either, but we're seeing things, you know, we're seeing things. It's not that we've done all this and we've seen nothing. And I appreciate you doing, that this is anecdotal, but it was very powerful when you said that the other night, you know, it doesn't stink.
A lot of people nodded their heads when I said it.
A lot of
'Cause, yeah,
people.
I live near
Yeah.
Little Pond, I walk it almost every day, and I've been there since 1996. And yeah, it used to smell. I would gag when the wind was from the east. Fortunately, I'm on the west side and the wind was blowing the other way. It would smell. You would see, it looked like a carpet undulating on the surface of the pond, the algae mats. They're gone. The measurements Ken has, and I'm just gonna steal some of his data in layman's terms.
You're welcome.
In the groundwater, it's measurably improved. It hasn't improved as much in the pond content itself, the water body. What's coming into it has improved with the sewering, But the impact on the water, the clarity, people swim in it again. People that have lived on it for all their life are now saying, I go in the water again. So it's working, it's just taking time.
But one point I'd like to make is, we started making these measurements pretty recently. So we started doing the groundwater 2015. We have a nice time course of that. But the actual pond, health measurements, the only long-term record is the MEP chlorophyll at the Sentinel Station and through,
Right.
which has not shown a great improvement. But I think that, so the pitch that I would make is that we should be doing more measurements in the ponds of things that we can
And I'm putting you on the agenda. over the next couple of
tangibly
meetings do
look
this.
to and say, oh, look, Perch Pond does not go anoxic the entire month of August
Right.
after we put in the sewer.
No, I've teed you up for the whole water quality monitoring thing. The other night, I was very fascinated by what you said. And when you feel comfortable coming before this committee with a presentation on what you're trying to do, where you're at, and how you're gonna go forward with that data, that'd be great. Okay?
As soon as I figure it out.
Yeah. Why not? Okay. And by the way, we just hijacked your presentation.
It's totally fine.
Okay.
Keep your breather.
I got 2 more to go, don't worry.
Did you have a comment that you felt important to jump in? No, not you. Jed?
Oh, not really.
Okay. All right.
Steve, I do.
By the way, for those of us who attend all the time, this is Jed Goldstone, and he's on the Board of Health, and I think you're acting as the liaison between the Board of Health and this board.
No, actually, George Hoyfelder is technically, I just happen to be here.
Well, I don't see George, so I'm thinking it's you.
Because John came and talked to us on Monday, so we had a long discussion with him.
Go ahead.
What I'm about to say is not in any way a criticism of what Kristen did, because she did an excellent job on what she was asked to do. What I think would be very useful is if this global reasoning, which you just espoused verbally very well, was in writing for everybody to see. The theory of, the planning theory of the outfall and so on. I mean, you could argue that, well, it should be in all of our heads, but there are a lot of parties involved here, and I think if it was a work in progress but written report, it would be very useful. Just my personal opinion.
Suggestion received.
I have one other comment, if I could, on the high concentrations in the septage, or in the leachate from septic tanks. My understanding, and this is what George always argued, George Hoyfelder was, the reason that they've gone up is that water usage has gone down because of low-flow toilets. The total mass of nitrogen should therefore not be changed.
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to-
But when you look at the MEP average number, so that last portion was 135, and when I look at the MVP, which the most recent data they included, it's like a 6-year average, has 2014, 15, and 16. The water use on that was 144. So it actually went up.
And that's a measured water use.
That one is.
Yeah, so that's perplexing.
Right,
I mean, is that just people watering their lawns more? or
and it
something?
could be.
Yeah.
All right, Jed can't contain himself. You have to go to the microphone, Jed, and introduce yourself.
Jed Goldstone, I am on the Board of Health, but not speaking for the Board of Health. I'm also a town meeting member, Precinct 2. Yes, there have been many arguments that the influent to a septic system is far higher than 35. I think 35 is actually sewage rather than coming septic. So it's average of a lot diverse systems. So I think it might be instructive if there were a way to rerun these models using a higher influent. It would probably argue that there is a lot more nitrogen attenuation in the subsurface than by 2 orders of magnitude, than, not 2 orders, twofold, sorry, than we are actually calculating based on the MEP. However, in terms of meeting a regulatory if this is the MEP values are the regulatory values, and you calculate removal based on the same thing, then it doesn't match reality. I would very much prefer it to match reality. I think it would give us a better understanding of how far away from the ponds we would need to really focus our efforts. Unless we get the models rerun in some way that corresponds a little bit better with reality, I think Kristen is doing a fabulous job with the data we have.
Thank you for your comment. I'm going to say, though, that I am not a proponent of trying to rerun or recalibrate models at this point. And here's where I'm at. We came off the model that we had. We've done the sewering around Little Pond, and we're measuring what happens. So the model may not be the best model. It's a model, though, that helps us, as we said a long, long time ago. People sat in this room 13 or 14 years ago now, when we were first making the Water Quality Management Committee in place, who argued about all of the faults of the MEP model and all of the needs to go after the MEP model and all of the needs to make the MEP model better. But the conclusion of the committee that I sat on at that time, and I think, John, you might have been on that same committee, was we know the estuary is in trouble. We know that we need to sewer certain areas to knock down the nitrogen. We now know we need to put more IAs in. We are on an exercise of using our best available information to at least set a boundary of where the IAs have to go in, okay? And to monitor those places that we do things to see if they're getting better and decide if we have to expand the sewer or the IAs, rather than spend time trying to rebuild or recalibrate a model and fight with the DEP and the state and everybody else over their model, not attenuating for, nitrogen getting consumed by the ground and everything else. So,
If I'm right, I just want to observe, it is not the best available information. We have just said that it's not available. There's debate, but it's not the best. It is the information that we are working on. We know that
we will submit to the DEP, and they will measure it against their criteria.
I'm not saying. All I'm saying is it's not the best available.
There's science and there's regulation.
Yes.
And we're trying to conform to what's being demanded
Right.
at this point in time.
I just want to be clear. It's not the best available. It is.
Can I just?
I'm an engineer, not a scientist, so I'm always close enough. You want to defer to John?
I will defer to Mr. Waterbury.
One of the main components to this is
Thank you.
DEP has acquiesced to adaptive management. In other words, they've said, we can propose to do X now. If in 10 years after we've done X, we're not there yet, we can propose to do something additional. If they were being really hard about it, but they've given us this out, and I think that's a really important part of what we're doing.
I just didn't want to get people's hopes up. That's all
Okay,
I'm
Ed,
saying,
Tom, Ed had his hand up. I'll let him go next.
I'm going to attempt to put this concept that we're talking about in simplistic layman's terms, because that's what I am. I happen to be an engineer by education, but, I'm far from a scientist. But the crux of the problem, as I see it, is the model is based on a certain amount of nitrogen being emitted by the average septic system. And let's say that's the amount. And the model says, well, if that much is going in to the ground, we got to get rid of some of it, so we'll do an IA that's going to take out 80, 90% of it. Great. If we do a sewer, we're going to take all of it out, so it's gone. Now, let's just say that premise in the model is wrong. It's not that, it's two of them. Well, what happens is when you do the IA, you're still taking out 80 or 90% of that, even though the initial number is larger. You're removing a larger amount. If you sewer, you're taking out two of them. So you pick a model that everybody agrees to back when the MEP was established, and go with it. If that model is wrong because it's actually two of these in there, it still works, because for every house use sewer or IA, you're taking out either 80% or 100% of that nitrogen. So it really doesn't matter as long as you pick the same model and apply it consistently. That's how I understand it.
Okay, would you like to move on to your, finish this watershed?
I mean, it's up to
And-
you.
and we got two
Well,
more to
I
go.
finished that one.
We got 2 more to go.
All right, Childs River, it's done the same way. So, image on the right is the full extent of the Childs River watershed. This line here, that's the town boundary. And this is more up close of what is within the Falmouth boundaries. So this sub-embayment has 2,790 parcels. 1,470 of those are within Falmouth. Pretty similar to Eel Pond, there are about 70 parcels on record as having a year built since the finalization of the MEP. In this portion, there are more surface waters with attenuation potential, which makes load calculations more challenging. The upper part of the Childs River North, the MEP has assigned a 15% attenuation factor. You've got Grassy Pond, Ashumet Pond, and Johns Pond, all with different outflows into Childs River. And then there's Fresh Pond, which is in Falmouth. Same data sources for this one. All right, so the GHD allocation for here. MEP and GHD all call these something different. So Childs River North in the MEP is referred to as Childs River Freshwater. Childs River South in the MEP is called Childs River Upper. So the northern part, 52% is what GHD determined Falmouth is responsible for, whereas the southern part, 100%. So when you apply those percentages to what's in the MEP for those individual sub-embayments, you have a total for this sub-embayment of 4,134. So this is the build-out number from the MEP. Again, it's all there to reference what the different models are showing. The MVP says more than twice as much needs to come out from this particular sub-embayment. The MVP lumps both of these together as one whole entity, so actually dividing out the portions and applying GHD's calculations was more challenging. So I did it as an estimate working within the MVP database. So for those numbers, we have about 1,950 kilograms from the north, and in the south, 3,145 is what would be Falmouth's responsibility. So this is what the MVP map looks like. Again, it's the entire extent of the Childs River sub-embayment. These are the water use numbers. Ironically, these come out to the same average water use in the MVP as for Eel Pond. So it's the same potential reduction value for an IA versus a sewer. So for the northern part, there's no sewer planned in there in Childs River Upper, or the southern part. That's the top of Seacoast Shores. That's the western part of Cmte. So that's the potential removal from that planned sewer area. So there are IAs that would need to be installed to meet the TMDL. So looking at the MVP numbers, again, because it was kind of a rough estimation, and also at the head of the watershed, there's a lot of ponds doing a lot of things and feeding into each other, and that cascading attenuation isn't captured easily in the MEP. But it's a very, very small portion up there. So this is my best estimate as what the MVP loading allocation would look like. So this is the same long-term water quality monitoring data. This is actually the Sentinel station for Childs River. In the MEP, at their present monitoring time, it was 0.65. The analysis shows that it has a statistically significant trend of increasing in total nitrogen. So that means it's getting worse from 2014 to 2020. This is what the proposed geo-boundary looks like for the two different portions. Again, this is based on what we just talked about of what it takes with what the town has capacity for what's planned for sewering to get to the regulatory number. So the pink area is the planned sewer area that falls within the Childs River sub-embayment. This darker blue is what's in Childs River South. So this is what it would take for IAs to get the Childs River South load that was allocated by GHD to meet the TMDL. The northern portion, there's also a small section up here. This is 151, John's Pond, Ashumet Pond. There's a small portion up here that actually falls directly within the southern portion. It comes through Fresh Pond Well and Fresh Pond. The light blue is what is in the northern part. And essentially all of the parcels within the northern part under having IAs don't get you to the TMDL. Looking at the IA lot screening, again,
That's assuming 10 milligrams.
that's assuming 10 milligrams per liter. The IA lot screening, just to reiterate, this was done based on measurements given by an IA installer for the specific measurements for one of the town's preferred system. And what this does is it looks at the amount of available open space on a parcel. So it subtracts out the building footprint, deck footprint, pools, driveways, to see if there's enough square footage that may be able to handle an upgraded system. So this is meant as a guide to say, maybe some of these areas don't make sense for IAs. If you're going to have increased engineering challenges for putting systems in, what's the cost benefit? So that's just kind of the rough screening for that. One of the other things we've talked about for this watershed, and we put in for the NRCS money, which we never heard back from.
Not
Chuck,
yet.
Chuck never heard anything.
Not yet.
Was two potential PRB locations. One was in the northern part, just south of this development up here. This is 151. Again, this is the Plum Hollow area. So this is, there's the Falmouth Beagle Club. This is on an existing dirt road on that property, which runs pretty much perpendicular to the general flow of water in that area. Another area that we've looked at would be just northwest of the main river itself, to capture a good portion of these homes kind of right in this area. So that's another consideration that we've looked at here, but there hasn't been, this is just a rough desktop evaluation for that. So what the numbers look like, again, using the average reduction for single-family home, and then for parcels that are not single-family residents, looking at what the MVP water use is. For all of those parcels, including the sewering for Childs River, when you look at it as a whole, you're close to your TMDL. Again, all of the parcels in the northern part are included in that boundary. Not everything in the south is. There was that small section in Fresh Pond that wasn't, because we were already at and slightly exceeding the regulatory number for that area. Looking at it from the MVP perspective, you're about 1,000 kilograms short, just from that model. So basically what I just said, you would meet it in the southern portion, but not in the northern sub-embayment. The other, your fertilizer and stormwater credits, if you were to consider those, that's another 321. There was no suitable areas for shellfish within Childs River that were identified. The IA district for Childs River represents about 60% of the Falmouth parcels, and the sewer district is 36%. So that's 96% of those parcels in that sub-embayment that are impacted. And then we're just gonna keep tallying on here. That's the end of that one.
Thank you.
Question?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, the Plum Hollow lot size determination figure,
That's this.
that one, yeah, exactly. Already there's IAs in what appear to be some of the very smallest properties in the development. So it certainly seems possible to somehow shoehorn IAs into, so it
These
may
are
be.
ones that are 19 milligrams per liter.
Right, but
So-
what I'm saying is the physical placement of.
Yes.
It seems that people have been able to fit them in, so maybe our screening is a little too tight, and maybe, we could add more lots by changing the criteria for the
Potentially.
screening algorithm. And that's just what I noticed from looking at
Right.
that figure.
As I said, it was working off of measurements for one of the preferred systems.
Yeah.
And this is, as we were saying earlier, it doesn't take into account if you have a connected
Right.
spot to put it, or if you have part of that open area is here and another part's over here, nor does it look at whether there's large trees on the property.
I think part of this, doing it sort of conservative, it's not easy, you can fit things into every
Right.
one of these lots. But this helps to identify that.
Right, oh, no, I
the-
agree.
The cost for engineering and construction, there's probably a small lot premium to
Right.
get an IA.
Yeah, I'm just saying, just what I observed
Yep.
there.
Yep. Steve?
On the same subject, these lots already have Title V systems?
That's the assumption.
We don't know.
Okay, so,
We don't know.
and so the screening wasn't to see if they would fit the leaching field, it was to see if they would fit the extra tank for the IA, right?
So the screening was everything.
Yeah, she used a septic tank, an IA module, and a SAS, a leaching field.
Okay.
Okay? So if they already have 2 out of the 3, they've got less work to do, but just,
At the last meeting, in a different discussion, Corin Peterson pointed out that advanced IAs allow you to reduce the size of the leaching field.
Right.
And I didn't know whether to believe that or not. So I went to Scott McGann, and now we have all these health department, Board of Health people here, I got a further answer, said that in remedial situations that was allowed, and that you could reduce the leaching field up to 50%. And the leaching field is very large compared to the tank. So it would seem to me, in a relatively small size reduction of any leaching field, if it's in fact allowed, would certainly accommodate the new tank.
So then you're looking at additional construction costs.
your analysis is perfectly okay. The green squares here just indicate that somebody's gonna have to look at it, make that determination, go to the Board of Health, get them to agree to that reduction, et cetera, et cetera. So that costs money, okay?
And the alternative, and this is my last question, in the area where you said IAs wouldn't cut it, so one of the obvious alternatives is to build more sewers there, I suppose.
Potentially.
You wanna
Correct.
put another outfall in?
That's why, that's why I'd like to see all this in
We
writing.
have tons of boundary conditions around
Yeah,
this,
okay.
okay?
So this is something where
So
maybe you look
I
at,
just want, so, I come back to your little green dots there. I might have a 1,500 gallon septic tank, which is the basic septic tank you have to have, okay? If you have a certain number of bedrooms, you gotta get a bigger one, but I doubt that anything over here is anything other than a 1,500 gallon tank. You're not gonna get rid of that. Now, you gotta fit this IA module in, and you now realize you could cut your leaching field down by 50% to create real estate to put the IA module in. But now you've gotta rip up part of your leaching field and reconfigure it. So this is where the money, the engineering, all of that comes back into play.
Yeah, you have to calculate the full detailed costs of
Right.
both approaches.
Corin's not here, but
it's because we're not in Buzzards Bay.
Jed, you were sitting on the Board of Health at that time when all of that West Falmouth stuff came in. And there were 20 or 25 parcels in West Falmouth that they wanted to run experiments on IA systems. And every one of these lots had some interesting or different or whatever. Some of them had to raise the beds, some of them replace the beds, some of them, every one of them was different, And some of those properties were pretty large and had room, but they got into groundwater issues, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to engineer these things, and it takes time. And, I mean, to me, this is an instructive map to say, if you're green, it's probably gonna take some work to figure it out.
Yeah.
And if you're not green, there shouldn't be much resistance to doing it.
It's
Step up to the microphone.
regardless of whether or not it's green or if it's not green, it still will require an engineer and a designer.
Yep.
So the cost of put one in, that aspect of it is
We
going to be
include
the
that,
same.
yep. Yep,
So-
we got that, yep. But it's a big range number. It's like, is it 3,000 or 10,000 to get an engineer to do it? I'm just saying that we're using a range right now, Jed, that says you can spend this or this until somebody gets there specifically. If there's any engineers left in town when they start doing this. You got a third one?
I do have a third one.
All right, let's tee it up.
All right, so this is the main basin of Wacoit Bay and the areas to the east. These are lumped together because there's only one sentinel station. It's in the main part of the bay, right around here. So this is the extent of these areas. You can see it goes all the way up. And Falmouth's boundary is right here. It comes down the middle of this. So this is what's in Falmouth. So there's about 3,000 parcels in this collective portion. 649 of those are within Falmouth. Falmouth assessor, there are 24 parcels that have been built since the MEP. The only attenuation in this area is from the upper Quashnet River, which is primarily outside of Falmouth's boundaries. Same data sources. So here is the GHD percent allocations for each of these sub-embayments and what the MEP number works out to for Falmouth in each of these areas. So in total for all of this, about 1,576 kilograms. Wacoit, Maine, in the MEP, there is no nitrogen to remove from there. That's coming from the MEP. The MVP, again, slightly higher, but that's what we have been seeing. So this is how the MEP,
Can you
Yeah.
point out where Wacoit, Maine is
I
on
will.
the watershed map?
I will. Give me a second to get to a
Okay.
better map. So this is what it looks like on the Cape Cod Commission database. So they have Quashnet River together, whereas there's actually several portions broken out in the MEP. Right here, Ken, this is the main basin, this yellow area down here.
So, yeah, all right, thank you.
And then in the commission, you have Red Brook and Hamblin Pond together, and that's over here. This dotted line right here, that's the town boundary. So water use is pretty close for this one. For MVP, it comes out to 139 gallons per day. The MEP number was the same for the entire Wacoit Bay system. Because it's lower, it still, with rounding, comes out to 2.7 kilograms a year for single-family residents. So to get to these different portions, you're looking at about almost 600 IAs that would need to be installed at 10 milligrams per liter. With the MVP numbers, you're looking at closer to 900. So this is long-term data again, but this is from the Moonicus River. Because again, the Sentinel Station is kind of over here, and there's no nitrogen reduction required for the main basin. But there is concern over here for Moonicus Quashnet. So this is, at this station, for the MEP, they measured an average of 0.684. And here, the 2014 to 2020 data says there's no significant change in the water quality. And you can see the numbers are actually still within what they were in the MEP. So there hasn't been a significant increase, nor has there been a decrease. So this is the proposed geo-boundary for these areas. So part of the sewer plan is Cpte Peninsula. The eastern side of that actually falls within Cpte River and the main portion of the bay. So we are taking some nitrogen out from that sub-embayment through sewering. Quashnet, we have the lower Quashnet. Right here is the line, so it's this small portion. Middle Quashnet, which goes to here. And then the upper Quashnet, which is mostly not in Falmouth, is this portion up here. Red Brook and Hamblin are together over here, and they're the orange section. So that's kind of how I'm showing what's coming from where. So for Red Brook and Hamblin, the entire portion that's within Falmouth's boundaries is part of the district. For Quashnet, everything except for a small portion of the upper Quashnet, because based on the math, we get there without having to do all of them. So this is just a little bit closer of what's going on. You can see how many IAs are already in the watershed. Those were accounted for at 19 milligrams per liter in the math. You know, the vacant parcels, the developable lots are all included in there. So this is the lot screening. The blue is just to show you what actually was in the geo-boundary. So again, we have the same screening parameters for the IAs. And then this is what the math looks like for each of these sections. So in the Quashnet River, this is the lower and middle Quashnet, you're close, but you don't get there. And all of the parcels in both of those sections were included in the geo-boundary. Hamblin Pond, all of the parcels were included that are in Falmouth are included in that geo-boundary. For the upper Quashnet, Municus, that was that part that had a couple of parcels that weren't included because we're already there. And Red Brook, all of the parcels were included and were right at the MEP numbers based on the GHD allocations. With the MVP numbers, we're slightly under. So this basically just summarizes it. For that upper Quashnet part, if you were to include that in the geo-boundary, it would be another 40 kilograms, plus the existing IAs that are in there. Fertilizer and stormwater, it's another 200. So Wacoit has a significant amount of shellfish potential based on the screening that Chuck and Marine and Environmental Services did. There is, a lot of it is down in the south near the inlet, which we won't talk about because Steve doesn't like to talk about it. There is a significant amount of acreage right here at the mouth of the Quashnet, which may have some tidal benefit up there. There's another section up here in the main basin, and then there's some stuff over here in the Cpte. But there's a big section down here. So that's where the shellfish is at, according to the maps. So for this area, for the main and the east sub-embayments, it's about 96% of Falmouth parcels that are in there. So this is what all three portions of Wacoit Bay look like for what is currently included in the planned sewer area, and this should be pink, sorry about that. All of the blue is what the IA geo-boundaries look like.
Very good.
Can you show that land, the one?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, is it Michelle? Am I mispronouncing your name?
Michaela.
Michaela. So Michaela is from Mashpee, and I don't mean to put you entirely on the spot, but if you don't mind coming to the microphone, and just, where is Mashpee at in terms of, I know we've heard that you're doing certain things, whatever, just, you know, kind of give us an overview of where your plan may or may not be at, or things you're working on, because we're focusing on the Falmouth side of this, but there's a whole nother portion to get to water quality in this basin. Thank you.
Thanks. I usually don't do this without notes, so don't hold me to exact.
We're a very informal and welcoming group. Aren't we, Steve?
So on,
Depends whether the speaker's good or not.
on the town warrant, or what we think is going to be at the town warrant that's gone through the select board, is a plan to explore a site up near the back road area, so directly impacting Wacoit Bay. We're also in process of investigating the possibility of using systems, privately owned systems that are in place, evaluating those to see how we could make use of those for that same area. Those are the two main things for Wacoit Bay that are going on right now, with plans to get this started up as soon as it gets through town meeting.
So in Falmouth here, we made the decision that we were going to develop watershed plans. I believe Mashpee made that
Yes.
similar decision.
Yes.
Okay.
Is it the NOI that went in and met the summer's date? Yes, we're submitting the full watershed plan.
On the other side, we have Bourne, where we share a watershed with them, and Bourne has decided not to do watershed plans and just to let the regulations fall into place.
No, Mashpee is definitely submitting a watershed plan.
Okay, that's good, thank you.
Okay.
I thought you should say your full name and your title, so
Oh.
people know who you are here.
Okay. Michaela Wyman Colombo. I'm a member of the Mashpee Select Board, and I'm a member of the Wacoit Bay Intermunicipal Agreement Team.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Well, thank you for attending today. Okay.
Two questions for Kristen. Can you go back to that last text slide? Yeah. One is nitpicking typo, but your second sentence, you intended that to have the word "not" in there, correct?
Probably, yes.
Okay. And this is also just a suggestion, and I'm interested in other people's opinions. It might be neat to have a very simple table that shows for all of the estuaries what % of the expected load the current sewers are expected to handle. For instance, if it was 200%, somebody's lost their marbles, right? I mean, the financial people in town have the right to kick us all out. If it's 10%, we're losing an opportunity of scale, savings at scale. And if it's over 100%, we're potentially wasting the potential benefits of adaptive management. In other words, I would assume that it's, in each case, is of the order of 50 to 80%. Is that correct? Or is there a different philosophy that's going on?
It depends, and I thought it was in here on the other ones. It was a column in the table of what the sewering was slated to.
Yeah, you had it by pounds, not by percentage.
Right, I had it by kilograms, but I think because this was such a
You
small
could easily
portion in
convert to
Wacoit, in the main basin,
By pounds, kilograms.
Yeah, I just,
so I know it's in this one.
but I mean, is my philosophy correct that the whole idea of adaptive management is your first shot, you expect it to be some large fraction
Right,
of what you
so-
guess 100% to be, but not over that.
So right here, this is the Childs River portion. The estimated reduction from sewering is 2177, and the total that needs to come out is the 2899. So you can
So
pretty
totally
easily,
reasonable, yes.
right, so you can easily calculate your percent that way. But that is a table I can put together for you.
I just think that it would help a lot of laymen and financial people to understand the whole adaptive management idea.
Okay.
Because otherwise, I mean, my eyes glaze over at some of these tables, and it's not your fault. I hate to think what somebody who didn't study engineering happens when they see the numbers. So.
Other comments from the board members? Jonathan?
I guess when I look at their summary table on the running geoboundary numbers,
Yep.
I'm struck by the number of IA systems, 2,500. for Falmouth, and I guess that doesn't include all the
We haven't done
watersheds
this other,
yet.
Not yet.
is it from day one, I've
Just
said,
wondering how with the sheer volume of IA system requirements, how does that get handled by just a couple of companies that have the technical know-how to meet the 10 milligrams per liter? It seems like there has to be an effort to work with that community through the SUP, again, to grow that
yeah.
knowledge base and that engineering base, or else it's going to take decades upon decades to get this done.
Yeah, we're wrestling with several things here. I mean, I've been trying to march through the geo boundaries, because a long time ago, when we started talking about watershed plans, I said, there's probably 4,000 or more lots that will require an IA. And right now, that 4,000 looks like a low estimate to me, because we've got a couple more watersheds to
Got a
still
couple
cover.
big ones.
Huh?
We got a couple big ones to
A couple
go.
of big ones still. So, but to your point, that's why we brought in the folks on the SUP, started to look at that type of things, and, trying to understand better where somebody's gonna come in and play the game. I think we've got, thanks to my colleague to the far right here, I think we've got Pio Lombardo teed up in the near future to come in
Yeah.
and talk about, this is a guy that's been rattling around this whole, what's an IA system look like? How do you manage it? How does it go together? He's got his thoughts on it. We've invited him to come. Is it next meeting or later?
October.
He can't do it until
He's gonna come.
October.
But anyways, so stepwise, we're trying to say, what are the geo boundaries? Okay, how big is this? Then over the next year or 2 years, we're gonna be really wrestling with how do we implement some standardization? How do we set criteria? How do we find subsidies? How do we promote this whole thing?
I guess everybody knows it's huge. Do we really want to wait that long? The geo boundaries are just confirming what we know. It's going to take a massive effort, and that effort needs to start yesterday. Why wait a few years to start engaging and start planting the seeds that this is going to be an effort that's, like the Manhattan Project of, IAs?
I'm gonna go very practical on you. There is something called the 10-year capital plan. And the town manager and others will tell you how many millions, or what's the latest number, $500 million? 10-year plan?
Sorry, 728 million.
728 million.
Okay.
So we are sort of marching up behind with this, so working on developing the scale, the areas impacted and whatnot.
But that's out 16 years, so.
But go down ways. So, I'll step over a boundary line here, which is, as this committee gets a better handle on what needs to be done, what the scale of that is and what the cost might be, we've avoided up until now ever discussing a specific Proposition 2.5 override that's targeting funds to the sewer program. We've filled in on expiring debt. Town's trying to work with that. We can't just jack the tax rate way up, but there's a moment in time coming up over the next year and a half, where we're gonna have to say, this is what it's gonna cost if we do it in 20 years, this is what it's gonna cost if we do it in 10 years. How fast do you wanna get this done, and how are we gonna pay for it, okay? So, yeah, it's a good-sized problem.
Yeah, there's the town issue with tax, there's also the logistics, the engineering of having the materials, the manpower.
But I got you on the
The
training.
training.
Yeah, the
Same
training
thing
to
is,
do it.
I rope you into this committee, and you've got that all figured out already, so I'm looking forward to you giving me the solution.
Don't hold your breath.
You probably manage much bigger projects than this.
The thing, to Jonathan's point, we're just talking Falmouth here. We have a guest from Mashpee. They've already started, and I don't know how many, they've put a boundary of 1,000 feet from a water body that's impacted where you shall put in an IA. So they're looking at hundreds, if not thousands, of IAs. Tisbury on the Vineyard, they've got 1,500 in their mandate that they started this past January. So, we're at 2,500 IA mandated geo-boundary thingies here in Falmouth. Add in the Vineyard, add in Mashpee, add in the rest of the Cape. There are advocates like Z. Crocker and Barnstable that wants the entire town to have either a sewer or IA, not just geo-boundaries, but everything. There are folks pushing that the entire Cape has to either be sewered or IA'd. You're talking many, many thousands of houses. So the infrastructure does not exist to manufacture that $22,500 tank quick enough. And the scale goes up, it'll probably come down in cost, but then who's going to install the damn things? And who is going to monitor them? The problem is immense. It is immense. We've got a massive problem of what to do with the treated effluent from Amy's very efficient plant. We're out of land-based discharge, hence the outfall. There's another bunch of millions that we'll be looking to fund through tax revenue. Holy mackerel. That's why we're all here, and that's why we spend the hours we do. It's a massive problem. John has very eloquently highlighted the magnitude of the monitoring cost and the infrastructure you need, hence the development of the SUP. But that's in its infancy. It's a massive problem. That's why we meet every 2 weeks.
Other board members? Folks in the audience? Oh, everyone, put your hand up once. I'm going to start to the far right, because I think you got your hand up first.
Hi, my name's Maggie McGaw, and I live in Wacoit, and Wacoit Bay is...
You had a long drive over.
Excuse me?
You had a long drive
A
over.
long 15, 18-minute drive from there to here. You know, I subscribe to Tom's pessimistic vision, though I would love to see Steve's optimistic vision prove to be true. You know, I understand that everything takes time, and I will say what I am sure Hilda and Earl are going to say, that UD as a solution in this watershed, really, it cannot be overstated that it fits on so many, it hits so many of the conditions and criteria that you're talking about, you know, the lot size and the great simplicity of it, and the low expense of these systems and so on. And so I have a fervent hope that the UD pilot will move forward and that it will prove out. I really think that it's the stupid, simple, inexpensive solution to this problem. It does not require huge amounts of space on people's lots, and it does not require, you know, a massive infrastructure plan, and it doesn't cost hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars if it works as it is expected to work. In the meantime, there are houses being built and houses being renovated. Currently, you know, in the town of Wacoit, there's a 5-unit development that we understood originally was going to be 5 Title V systems. I think that's not going to happen. But it raised the question of why it is, or it raised the point that it is an urgent need for the town of Falmouth to enact the same, at least at a minimum, the same requirement that Mashpee has of a 1,000-foot setback from any surface water. That just is the simple, the obvious step, one obvious step the town of Falmouth should take, and it really should be taken effective January 1st of 2025. Everybody knows that the Title V septics are the problem. There's no reason on earth at this point for anything new to be built with Title V. Honestly, I think anywhere within the town of Falmouth. I don't think it should just be, because we all know that the groundwater flows down to the bays and the estuaries and through the ponds and so on. You know, and I want to renovate a bathroom, and I can't obtain and install. I could obtain, but I cannot install an approved urine diverting fixture currently. And so, in addition to urging you to do everything that you can to change the building code or the health code or whatever needs to be changed to stop new construction from having conventional Title V systems, the other thing that I would urge you to do, and I know the working group of the UD pilot project is on this, is to put pressure on the Plumbing Board of the Commonwealth to approve at least one appliance that a homeowner who does not want to wait.
I'm gonna keep you away from the
Yeah.
UD discussion a little
Well,
bit.
I'm just
Stay
saying,
in this.
I
But
want to renovate a bathroom, and I don't want
I hear you,
to,
but
I don't want.
We're talking about the
Right.
geo boundaries for this area.
But I'm within the geo boundaries. My house is on the map that
So
you just
let
showed.
me, I'm not
So-
trying to cut you off, but I'm trying to clarify so that you understand why I don't want to get into talking about the plumbing board and the UD thing. The UD thing is a separate item momentarily, but it's an item with potential. At the point where we get through the pilot and we get to the point where we have a sense of how many people will or will not adopt UDs, we, under the adaptive management approach, will come back to all of these geo boundaries and look at redefining them based upon your UD being an available function. We've just done it now at the 10 that the state says they're targeting for, okay? Now, on your 1,000-foot request, we're going down a slightly different path. We're going bigger than 1,000 feet.
Good.
If you pull up any one of those maps that we're creating, our expectation is to march before, the Board of Health has been, they know everything we're doing. We're gonna not go 1,000 feet just because it sounds good. We're gonna say, the geo-boundary is the area that any new construction, any upgrade, and at some point under a certain timeline, thou will put an IA in, or a UD if it's approved as an IA device, okay? So 1,000 feet doesn't do it.
I agree.
1,000 feet doesn't do it. So rather than waste all of our energy and our capital on getting 1,000 feet through, we're gonna push through something based upon less than a perfect model, but something that we can say, we don't need to do 1,000 feet at this place here, we need to do this whole big block. This whole big block. That's our goal as we get into the new year, to get these blocks adopted.
I'll just say a couple of things. One, the property that is supposed to have 5 new units built on it is not in the geo-bounded district. It is outside, based on the map that was displayed. So that is a concern to me. I just
Putting
don't
it in.
think 5,
They're putting in an IA.
I think they are, but
It's in
the
their budget.
initial plan
It's in their
was-
budget. I've met with them.
Yeah.
It's in their budget.
That is great news. I'm very happy to hear about that. And then, at the risk of repeating myself, as a homeowner who wants to renovate a bathroom, I want to be able to put in some kind of an approved fixture. And so anything that this committee can do to advance that would be great. And that's it. Thank you.
I'm gonna let somebody who I have seldom heard from, I don't know your name.
Lucinda?
And then I'm gonna march across the back row.
Thank you very much for calling me. Lucinda Keith, I live on Jenkins Pond. I have just a really simple request. I'm a teacher, so I look at things very basically. I think a lot of people that are at the meeting really have no idea that when you look at the Wacoit Bay, they think it's just gonna be this little area. I would love it if I got this map, if before we have the meetings, if a picture could go out. I doubt the people that are in Plum Hollow have any idea that they're included in this. So I would just, I don't know whether it could be put into the agenda, but I think they should know what's being discussed, because it's going to impact them.
I'll give some consideration to your request. What we do is we do post it to our webpage shortly after each meeting. We post all this information there.
Okay, thank you. I just would love this map, because it's very, very clear. Thank you for giving it to me. And good night, I'm leaving. Bye.
You know what, don't leave. Give Kristen your email address. She can get you a copy of the map. I've got you, Ron. You're next. Stay Vieira, say, Ron, I got you.
Good evening, Matthew Hanley.
Stu.
I have a question and then some comments. One of the things, because I grew up in Falmouth, and one of the big topics 20 years ago was the plume from the base. And the base had set up these large plants to take the groundwater up out of the table, filter it, then put it back in. And my question is, like, was there any nitrogen reduction from that process? Because it's my understanding that the base feels that the amount of the plume has dropped to a percentage now that they are going to mothball those plants, or at least run those plants at a lower level. So is there any information on that?
I'll answer your question directly. Their treatment process was not designed to reduce nitrogen, it was designed to strip VOCs.
Okay,
And I can talk to you about their whole status and plan at the end of this meeting.
okay. No, that was my question, if there was any
No nitrogen-
benefit
no-
from that.
No nitrogen reduction, stripping VOCs.
My other comment is, so being like involved in wastewater for a while, and what I've become proficient at is seeing things that other people aren't aware of. And because of my construction background, I've seen the from failed septic systems, I've seen the compacted soils around these cesspools and leaching fields when they're compacted full of nutrients. You know, you have nitrogen, phosphorus, PFAS, microplastics. That material is being taken out when there's a septic system failure or a replacement, and it's being hauled off to different parts of town of Falmouth. Mostly Thomas Landers Road to like the Benito pit or aggregates pit to be dumped. Now that material is high in nutrients, and now it's being dumped in an unlined pit, and now that material is leaching into that new water table that it's been transported from. One of the things I think the town of Falmouth could do we're leaving money on the table. Those nutrients that are being taken out from replacing septic systems, whether it's a Title V, an IA system, or urine diversion, if we could calculate how much nitrogen we're taking out from each one of those septic systems per cubic yard.
Tie this back to the geoboundary.
Well, the reason I'm talking about geoboundary is we're having challenges here saying like, I don't know if we're gonna be able to fit some of these smaller lots. What's the end cost going to be to the taxpayers of Falmouth or the homeowners in these areas? When we're not calculating these numbers, that's leaving money on the table. Because if you're saying, an IA system's going to remove this much nitrogen, well, how much nitrogen was removed just by putting that system in the ground? So we can take that credit. If we can calculate it as a town of Falmouth, we can calculate how much nitrogen and nutrients that we're taking out by replacing that system. We can go to the state and say, hey, we did this study, and per cubic yard, this is how much nitrogen and nutrients we're taking out of the system. We want this credit for the amount of nitrogen and nutrients that we're taking out of the table. And it doesn't cost the town of Falmouth anything. This is free money for the town of Falmouth. So I think this is a study that, could be done really easily. I'm willing to volunteer my time to do measurements, go to work with some of the septic companies in town like Delphi or Cavosa or, Grassi, and say, let's take some samples, send them out. We can calculate it. We can have scientific information, how much nutrients we're taking out, how much nitrogen we're taking out per cubic yard, and then we're getting that credit.
I made a note,
Okay.
okay?
Yeah.
I'm going to move on to the next one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Steve,
Ron?
Steve, I'd like to be excused. I've got a 6 o'clock meeting.
You can be excused.
Thank you.
Make sure you get that in the meetings that he was excused.
Did you bring a note?
I can write my own notes by now. Used to make my mother nuts.
Tom, just before you leave, we did publish the schedule for the next 4 meetings, right?
September so far.
I saw 2 meetings
Yep.
come up.
I didn't do
First and
October.
third in September and October.
Yeah.
First and third?
All right.
Yeah, good.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Ron Zweig, Precinct 1. I just have a couple comments. One is that on the Little Pond fragrance, about a dozen years ago when the oyster program started in Little Pond, the fragrance went away well before the sewer, and the water was much clearer. I don't know about TMDL, but the neighbors along the pond were saying that things had really changed. And the other thing is that, again, with Little Pond, is that in looking at the inflow, the sources of nitrogen, and I know that Ken is working on this, but there is a pretty good chance that, or there's a chance anyway, that the tidal inflow may be transporting a lot of phytoplankton from the sound that then is settles in Little Pond as the tide goes out. But that this net flow Ken's looking at.
Stay on the geoboundaries. Stay on the geoboundaries, okay?
Well, no, you've been talking about this earlier, so I'm just following on the meeting, commenting on the
I'll
meeting.
make sure you get a notice, because when he comes in to talk about what he's talking, what he's
Okay,
been
well, I
doing,
do.
it's touching on a lot of what you're doing
Kristen
now.
sends me the notices of the meetings, it's really great. So anyway, but I just want to say that there are a couple things here that, I don't know,
Yeah,
institutional memory.
The tidal flushing in Little Pond is a big
Yeah,
issue.
okay,
Yep.
thank you.
And I invite you to come back to the future meetings when we cover that. You choose between the two of you, who goes first?
We have different things for different people.
Choose between the two of you, who goes first?
Hilda Menge, Precinct 8. I have two concerns. One is that carbon footprint is never mentioned. If we start installing thousands and thousands of these installations, IAs, we have no clue what the carbon footprint is. So we're making the climate worse by installing these. So that's one concern I have. I also have the same concern as Tom about how much we can actually improve by doing all this. And the timeline that we're talking about, the longer we wait, the worse the ecosystem is, the more we have to fix and the more nitrogen we have to take out. It's getting worse, and it will be harder to do it. So I'm really concerned about all the suggestions we make about how soon we're going to do anything, and the concern about how can we possibly do thousands and thousands and thousands of these over the whole Cape, basically the whole country, because it's everywhere, just about, and do that in a timely manner so we can actually fix the ecosystem. That's the only interest I have, is to remove the nitrogen as fast as possible. And I don't think what we are talking about right now is the fastest way, let alone the cheapest way, and let alone the climate and the carbon footprint. That's never, ever discussed, and that really concerns me.
Earl, you're next.
Earl Barnhart, Green Center. I'd like to go back to this idea that the leach field in a house or in a property can be reduced by 50%. There's a certain amount of water coming out of the house, and it's going into the leach field, and it's supposed to drain away. And the leach field presumably is designed to drain the water away. Now, how can you knock off 50% of the leach field and still have that same amount of water drain off? Does that mean the leach fields are all 50% overbuilt?
No, Earl, I don't have an answer for you. It is inside the way the DEP and the Title V and the IA folks have looked at these things and have made determinations that the Board of Health can grant a certain type of waiver to fit a certain system in if they've got a certain level of treatment and reduce the SAS area. But the underlying basis for how they got there,
Can I comment, Steve?
give it a shot, John.
What basically is happening with the IAs is that you're reducing the BOD, the biological oxygen.
The suspended solids in the BOD.
And that is normally what causes bacterial mat growth in a field and its ultimate failure. So by reducing dramatically the BOD, you extend the life of the field, and by analysis can make it smaller.
I mean, there are systems that are called pulse feed systems where they pulse it in and then they let a tank fill up and let it dry out so it's not continually wet and growing biology. Other questions? Right. Reports of members and staff. I'm going to, Amy, you are here. Would you feel comfortable giving just a brief update of where the outfall is and maybe some of the, not going down too deep, but you've got many ongoing conversations with different regulatory agencies working towards getting the outfall further along.
I should have prepared for this,
I
but I didn't.
one of the things we're working on is permitting the marine borings. We still very much hope and plan to do the marine borings this winter. There are some permitting hurdles to that, and we're still working through those. We are also having conversations with the regulators. I'd mentioned anti-degradation before. The other thing we're working on is the Interbasin Transfer Act, we have a plan for data gathering for the eelgrass survey and the benthic survey that went through the review of the regulatory agencies. Unfortunately, we had that process took quite a while, and then we had we then had to award that contract between the town and Hui, and have not yet been able to do the eelgrass surveys that we had hoped to do this summer. We are still, we are on the schedule to do the second, we were planning to do 2 eelgrass surveys this summer. We are right now on Hui's schedule to do that in the second week of, or in the week of the 16th of September. I deeply hope we are able to do that the combination of the equipment availability and the weather works out that we are able to do that. That is still well within the eelgrass growing season and would serve as our summer eelgrass survey. So there's an enormous amount going on. That's the very brief summary.
That's good. I'm just going to help touch on the eelgrass. So we know through the state that they want at least 2 seasons of eelgrass information, and they're very specific about when they want that information gathered, which we didn't make that window for the state this year. However, the Army Corps of Engineer has a different criteria, and they just want to have current eelgrass mapping, which we hope to be able to get in September, and then see if the state accepts that or not.
So I'm sorry to, I don't think that's quite correct, in that I think if we can, if we do the survey in September, that will meet both needs. That will meet the needs of the summer survey for eelgrass. We missed an early summer, like a April-May timeframe for an eelgrass survey, but if we do the survey if we are able to complete the survey in September, then it will meet the needs both of our Army Corps of Engineers permitting for the marine borings and the first year summer survey for the remainder of the agencies.
I'd say we've got a fairly high level of confidence that the Army Corps will get satisfied. If the state, for whatever reason, isn't satisfied, we might have to come back and do another round next year.
So we're planning on doing 2 years of eelgrass surveys for our baseline for the EPA and DEP permitting. So we will definitely be back next summer.
Okay, good, thank you.
Anything?
Question, can I ask on the outfall pipe?
Yep, we may not go too far into the outfall, but go ahead.
Well, it's what you were talking about before, about the capacity of the outfall relative to the proposed amount of sewering. Are we at basically the limits? Was the sewering limited by
You and I can go have a cup of coffee, and I'll walk you through that, okay?
But
I just want Amy
it's
to
been done.
Oh, yeah, there's a bunch of work's been done on it. I want Amy to give a summary of, our big push right now is to get the borings done this winter and not lose a whole year on the project. So we're close to getting the permits we need. Okay?
I have a really quick one.
On permitting for marine borings.
Related to the ocean outfall.
Permitting for marine borings, not the whole outfall concept.
Okay. I hope I'm asking the right question. What has been the total cost so far for all the work that has been done on the outfall? From the beginning
We have
to...
we have a $2 million appropriation we're working with.
But how much has been spent so far?
We'd have to go look that up.
I would like to know, and how much more can be spent or should be spent, or are we going to spend?
Okay? Somebody else had a hand up. Okay?
I had a question about the eelgrass survey. I was, and maybe Amy knows this, the state was conducting some aerial surveys
Yes.
Do those count? Can you use that data?
The goal is to have all of it, right? We're going to do our own survey. We are also going to have the advantage of the state survey. They're doing the data collection in a different way, and the goal is to have all of it.
Gotcha.
So we are in very close communication with them. They know what we're doing, we know what they're doing, so we hope to be able to compare notes and not duplicate efforts too far into the future.
Can I just shout out a question? Just wondering what the area is that's being
You
served.
need to come to the microphone, sorry.
Walkway Bay, I'm just wondering what the area of this, what the survey area is for the eelgrass.
2,600, is it 2,600 foot from Kite Park in the Heights? You go out 2,600 feet into the Sound, and it's that piece of land in front of Kite Park.
Like 3 feet wide or?
No, the whole thing,
The width of the.
the whole thing.
The width of the park on, okay.
It's between Falmouth Harbor and the entrance to the next pond.
Little pond.
We're surveying offshore, and it's out as far as about 2,600 feet, and inshore, not completely to shore, but say, let's call it 400 feet from shore. So it's a big swath along the shore in that area.
Maggie, if you give your email address to Kristen, she'll send you the map from what we've done over the last couple of years in the area that we're looking at again.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Other committee reports.
I'll just say, I've been meeting with the Board of Health every 2 weeks, and we've been chatting about, I've been explaining to them these geo-boundaries that we're working on, and we've been chatting about IA issues in general, so it's been a very fruitful set of discussions.
And give us a quick update on the subsidy. You're waiting for something back from Ed?
Yes, the town finance director and the assistant town manager are both talking to the town council on the legality of various ways of subsidizing IAs and UDs. Because I think part of the non-consensus on this committee was because everyone was thinking quite reasonably toward the end game of how do you actually implement any subsidy without doing things like wasting the tax credit and so on. And so they're trying to make that process feasible by finding out what's legal. And so I'm just waiting to hear what they say.
And has your UD committee been meeting
Yes.
at all?
The UD committee has moved its meetings, has been meeting every week, and they are going to issue a progress report within a week. That's a promise from the committee. The report is basically finalized and will be public in 1 week. Since there was a question on it, the plumbing board process is absolutely practically at the top of the agenda right now. I realize that that's relevant for all the reasons you said and many other reasons. It will not, they have not accomplished all the scope of the intermunicipal agreement is public. I don't know if it's on our website, but it's available somewhere. I'm sure that all the people that care about it have already seen it. That full scope did not meet the deadline will not meet the deadline of August 30th, but they will keep working, and the goal now is to have something so that they can go before spring town meeting instead of November town meeting.
Okay.
All right, Amy?
I had updates on on the other projects. The wastewater treatment plant improvement project is about 15% complete. The contractor has installed a new thickened sludge tank. They're expanding the blower room so we can add another blower and space for a future blower. They've begun laying out the rebar for the slab for the new SBR, and they've built the frame, the foundation and the frame for the vehicle storage building. So there's quite a bit going on there. As far as the design of the Great Pond Phase 1 project, that is, parts of it are 30% complete, parts of it are 60% complete. All but 2 of the soil borings were installed. All the survey has been done and is incorporated into the design. And we're reviewing lift station plans and portions of the collection system layout. So there's been a lot of progress there, and we're still planning on a April 2025, so next April, construction appropriation for that.
And on sort of just general public outreach, a number of us attended the T-Ticket Association's annual meeting at the Herman Room earlier this week. Amy gave a, I guess one could consider it, since we're in the political environment, her stump speech on how we got to an outfall and why the TASA sewers are coming in and where they're going to run. So she's got a nice little PowerPoint presentation that she can clean up at a moment's notice, and very instructive and filling. Ed showed up as a member of the committee, and Ken was actually on the agenda as well to make the presentation on where we're at with monitoring Little Pond and how progress is going that way. So I thought, Doug, were you there? I can't remember.
I was not.
You were not. Yeah, so that was a nice group. I'd say there were 25 people in the room.
Yeah.
20, 25 people. But they were all very interested in what's going on and where things are at. And so.
And there were cookies.
And there were cookies. Yes, there were.
Important part of the report.
All right. Yeah.
Yes, to just add to that too, you know, Amy's PowerPoint is great. The people in the audience are the people that live adjacent to or within the district that will next be sewered. So they were very interested in this topic. It's a small group, it's an old association. I've been a member for 20-odd years. It's the T-Ticket area. So Steve Rafferty was also there and had some comments. Ken gave an excellent presentation on the water quality of Little Pond. And we didn't talk about it at our last meeting, but earlier in the month of August, Steve and Amy also did a presentation to the Falmouth Heights Mara Vista Neighborhood Association, which is a larger group but centered in the Falmouth Heights area and part of Mara Vista. They had concerns and questions about the outfall and the whole sewering thing, but it was great that, again, public outreach, because the education of the taxpayers and the neighborhoods that are going to have direct impact of the construction of these infrastructures, whether it's sewering or outfall, is, I think, extremely important. So I just want to mention, and you know, the presentations were great, very informative, and people really take the info to heart. I also just want to update the committee where a pet project of mine has kind of been Snug Harbor and the impact of the wastewater treatment plume to that portion of West Falmouth Harbor. It's in terrible condition, and I'm hoping that there's something we as a town can do shorter term than waiting for outfall and eventual flushing of that groundwater, because I won't live long enough to see it. So I've been exploring a PRB potential for that. There have been some studies done about 10 years ago about potential PRB sites in Falmouth. In Snug Harbor, West Falmouth Harbor was part of that. Town, for various reasons, elected to do it in another area, but the data is still good. I've talked with our town engineer about the need for some stormwater infrastructure there, and he put that on his checklist of, let's see what, if anything, can be done, because there's no catch basins at Snug Harbor. All the road runoff, lawn runoff goes right into the harbor. So they're doing that. Been in dialogue with Isotech about what might be potential there. So I continue to pursue that, and should it come to a point of, hey, how much would it cost to do some more engineering? I'll look for grant sources, possible town budget funding for an initial study of what is feasible. So.
All right.
So I forgot.
to mention, I did a very similar presentation, and there was a detailed discussion at the West Falmouth Village Association meeting a couple of weeks ago as well, of the same, the planning for Great Pond Phase 1 sewering and the outfall.
Can these presentations be put on the Water Quality Management Committee website for others to see?
Absolutely. No problem.
Yes.
No problem. All right, let's move on to item 3, the minutes of the prior meeting. Tom is not here, so we might get through this quicker. I had just a couple of very quick, I think, small corrections in the very first page. The second paragraph under item 1, about 2/3 of the way down, it says, "All participants in the town ensure fairness and consistency." I think you're missing the word "to."
Okay.
Okay? And then on the line that says, "It's estimated this plan would range from $900 to $1,000 per year."
Yep.
I would add "per house,"
Okay.
just for some clarity. And then on the second page, under item 2, again about halfway down, Kristen, there's a sentence that starts off by says, "He agrees that there should be a subsidy, but is things determined." So I think the word is,
I got
it-
that.
but,
I told Kristen.
but be, yeah, okay, all right, good, okay, good. So.
Well, wait, what's the correction?
You read the sentence, you'll see.
You find the sentence?
That involves what you said.
He agrees that there should be a subsidy,
Do you
but
smell funny? You cleared the room.
is things determining fairness in the subsidy, so it should
It's just a
should be.
typo. It's an obvious typo.
Oh, down there.
Yeah, way over there.
It's the same. It just looks bigger, it's a bigger screen.
Okay.
Your water bottle.
Everybody's
Doug,
leaving.
Doug,
Well,
So
we-
just strike is all you
Yeah.
need to do.
I move they be accepted as you have just corrected them.
Okay,
Second.
okay, this is motion made and seconded, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And our next meeting is
the 11th.
4:30, here.
911.
Yes.
Good?
That's a propitious date.
Motion to adjourn?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Motion to adjourn.
Second that motion.
Second. Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, good job.
Wow,
Good job.
early.